It was the kind of Sunday where the sun was too bright for comfort. You know the type, when even the air smells like something is about to happen. The ushers were sweating through their white gloves, the choir had lost its usual rhythm during praise and worship, and Pastor Daniel kept checking his wristwatch like he was waiting for an announcement from heaven. Then Mama Folake stood up. Now, if you know anything about Mama Folake, you'd know she doesn't just stand up in public. She's the type of woman who prays with her eyes open, always in the second row, always humming one hymn or another under her breath. Never speaks unless spoken to. But today, she didn't even ask. She just walked straight to the pulpit, her ankara wrapper rustling against her legs, her girly slightly askew from the heat. Even Pastor Daniel stepped back, his white collar suddenly feeling too tight around his neck. She didn't greet the church. Didn't say, "Praise the Lord." She just held the microphone like it owed her money and said, "What I'm about to say is not for the faint of heart." The hall fell quiet, that heavy kind of silence that makes your ears ring. 25 years, she began, her voice steady but her hands trembling against the wooden podium. I have been living a lie. But I can't die with this secret. Now let me tell you, half the women clutched their handbags tighter, and Deacon Jerry's cough turned into a wheeze. You could feel something crawling up your spine. A few people were already praying in tongues, quietly, their lips moving like they were tasting something bitter. But in the third row, Sister Nene didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She just watched, her fingers wrapped around her worn leather Bible. And if anyone had been paying attention, they would have noticed the faintest smile on her lips. The kind of smile that said, "So you're finally ready to tell them, but will you tell the whole truth?" For a moment, it was as though the walls of the church leaned in to hear her. Mama Folake's grip on the microphone tightened, her eyes scanning the crowd, but not looking for anyone in particular. Or maybe she was. Maybe she was trying not to look at Sister Nene. "I married a good man," she began, her voice cracking slightly. "Good to a fault. But I wasn't good to him." The silence deepened. Even the ceiling fans, which had been groaning like they were ready to fall, seemed to hush. The afternoon light streaming through the stained glass windows cast rainbow shadows across the congregation, but somehow the colors looked muted, drained. "I didn't cheat. No. Not with a man. But I did something worse. I made a covenant. A blood covenant. At midnight. With someone, and something, that was not of God." Somewhere at the back, a baby whimpered. The mother gently hushed it, but even she couldn't tear her eyes away from the woman at the pulpit whose confession was unraveling like a thread pulled from an old cloth. "I was 25. Broke. Angry. Hungry for power. I wanted a child more than I wanted peace. And I wanted to silence the woman who laughed at my barrenness." Her eyes flicked briefly to the congregation, where several women shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "So I went somewhere. A place I swore I would never go. They told me, 'You'll conceive, but it'll cost you something sacred.' I paid without asking what the price was." She paused, her breath shallow. For a moment, her age showed, like the years had been hiding behind her spine, waiting for her to confess. "I got pregnant that same month. A beautiful girl. But from the day she was born, strange things began to happen. My husband lost his sight for 3 days, not from illness, but from terror. He kept saying he saw shadows moving in broad daylight. My sister's first son vanished from school. He was found behind the church, sleeping under the altar, whispering names we didn't know. Names that made the adults who heard them cross themselves and refuse to repeat them. A wave of shivers passed through the congregation like wind through tall grass. And the worst part. Her voice dropped low, forcing everyone to strain forward. I saw the woman again, the one who gave me the charm. She didn't age. Not one wrinkle in 25 years. Same smooth skin. Same knowing eyes. Same red lips that never seemed to need lipstick. But in the third row, Sister Nene shifted for the first time. Crossed her legs. And her eyes glinted with something sharp, memory, maybe. Or recognition. Her fingers tightened around her Bible until her knuckles went white. Nobody breathed. Pastor Daniel looked frozen in time, his sermon notes crumpled in his sweaty palm. Deacon Jerry held his Bible like it might shield him from whatever spiritual breeze had just entered the room. And somewhere near the choir stand, Sister Ruth was already praying in tongues under her breath, her eyes firmly shut, as if not seeing could protect her from what was coming. But Mama Folake kept going, her voice gaining strength like a dam about to burst. I saw her 2 weeks ago. The woman from the shrine. She was standing across the road from my daughter's shop, wearing the same white wrapper she wore 25 years ago. Same clothes. Same face. Same mocking smile. 25 years, not one wrinkle. Not even dust on her sandals, though she stood on the red earth like she'd been there all day. Someone gasped, a sharp intake of breath that cut through the thick air. She waved at me. Like we were old friends. Like I still owed her something. And when she smiled, Folake's voice broke. When she smiled, I remembered what I had forgotten. That night wasn't just about getting a child. It was about opening a door. A door that was never meant to be closed. She stopped there. Just stopped. The microphone crackled with feedback, but she didn't flinch. She didn't ask for prayers. Didn't call for mercy. She simply said, I'm done, dropped the microphone on the altar with a hollow thud, and walked back to her seat, slowly. Like a prisoner going back to her cell after a failed parole hearing. But Sister Nene, she stood up next. Now, if you ask anyone in that church what happened next, they'll tell you they didn't expect it. Not from quiet, reserved, prayerful Nene who always wore long sleeves and never raised her voice above a whisper. She didn't walk to the altar. She just turned to Pastor Daniel, her voice cutting through the stunned silence like a blade through silk. Pastor, with your permission. I think there's something the church needs to hear. The room tensed like a cold spring. Because if Mama Folake's confession shook the church, Sister Nene's voice was the thunder that followed the lightning. Nene didn't shout. She didn't tremble. Her voice was calm. Too calm. Like someone who had been rehearsing these words for 25 years. 25 years ago, she began, pulling back her left sleeve to reveal a circular scar burned into her forearm. I was the one who followed her to the shrine. Heads spun like tops. Whispers erupted and died just as quickly. I didn't go inside. I waited at the mango tree by the road. She didn't know I was there. I had followed her because I loved her. Not like sisters love sisters. I admired her. She was bold. Fierce. She had everything I didn't have, courage, beauty, the kind of laugh that made men turn around twice. A few church mothers were already whispering behind their hands. Scandal was in the air now, and it smelled strong, like burning incense mixed with something rotten. But what I saw that day. Nene's voice faltered for the first time, her composure cracking like old paint. It wasn't human. She went into the shrine at noon when the sun was directly overhead. But when she came out, the sun was gone. It was dark, not evening dark, but wrong dark. Like someone had thrown a black cloth over the sky. And I swear on my life, something else came out with her. A shadow. Tall. Impossibly tall. It followed her like smoke follows fire. It slid across the ground without making a sound. And it never left. There was a loud bang, one of the metal offering bowls tipped over, rolling across the floor with a hollow, echoing clang. No one dared to pick it up. Even the children seemed to understand that some sounds were not meant to be interrupted. She thought she went there alone. She didn't. And she thought she left it behind when she walked away. She didn't. Nene's voice dropped to almost a whisper, but somehow every word carried to the back of the church. The thing that came out of that shrine is still here. In this church. It's been feeding. Growing. Waiting. And now. She looked directly at the empty space where Mama Folake's daughter usually sat. Now it's ready to collect what it was promised. The power cut was sharp and violent, like someone had slashed the main cable with a machete. 1 second they were staring at Sister Nene, frozen in the amber light of afternoon sun through stained glass. The next, the hall was swallowed in total darkness so complete it seemed to have weight. Even the emergency lights failed. The generator, known for its stubbornness and loud protest, refused to start. For a long minute, there was only breathing. Heavy, uneven breathing from dozens of frightened souls. And then, the crying started. A child somewhere near the front let out a scream so piercing, so filled with terror, it cracked through the silence like lightning through storm clouds. It wasn't the kind of cry that came from fear of the dark. No. This was deeper. Primal. It was the kind of scream that came from seeing something that shouldn't exist in the same world as church hymns and communion bread. People began to stand, chairs scraping against the concrete floor. Some reached for their phones, but none turned on their flashlights. Nobody wanted to see what else might be in the room. Nobody wanted to confirm what their skin was already telling them, that they were no longer alone in the darkness. Then Sister Nene's voice rose again, calm, but urgent, like a lighthouse calling ships away from jagged rocks. Do not panic. Just pray. Whatever it is, it feeds on fear. The more afraid you are, the stronger it becomes. That's when Pastor Daniel found his voice. Church, he called out, his voice cracking with authority and desperation. Sing. Sing a hymn. The old one. The one our mothers taught us. It started like a whisper, trembling and uncertain. I surrender all. Then louder, more voices joining. All to thee, my blessed Savior. Voices rose, shaky at first, but growing stronger with each word. The sound filled the darkness like light, pushing against whatever presence had settled over them like a shroud. And then, just like that, the lights flickered back on. But one chair in the front row was empty. Mama Folake was gone. They found her later, sitting alone behind the vestry, staring at the wall like she was reading words written in a language only she could understand. Her eyes were open, but distant, like she was looking through dimensions, seeing layers of reality the rest of them couldn't access. Pastor Daniel approached slowly, his footsteps echoing in the small space. He tried to touch her shoulder, but she flinched violently and whispered, "He's awake." Who? He asked, though something deep in his spirit already knew he didn't want to hear the answer. But she wouldn't say. She just rocked back and forth, humming a tune that sounded familiar but wrong, like a hymn played backward. Then little Nathan, Deacon Jerry's 6-year-old son, stepped forward. Nobody noticed him at first. He had been the one crying in the dark. But now, he was calm. Too calm for a child who had just experienced something that made grown men pray in tongues. I saw him, he said, his voice clear and steady in a way that made the adults more uncomfortable than his screaming had. Who did you see, Nathan? His mother asked, kneeling down to his level, her hands shaking as she smoothed his hair. The tall man with no eyes. People started to murmur, a low buzz of nervous energy and half-formed prayers. He came with her when the lights went out. He stands behind her now, but she can't see him. He said he's been waiting for 25 years. He said. Nathan paused, his child's eyes too knowing, too ancient. He said the door is almost open. Silence again. The kind that felt like holding your breath underwater. Then Nathan looked straight at Sister Nene, his gaze unwavering and somehow older than his years. And he said, "You know his name." He said, "You've always known his name, but you've been pretending you forgot." He said forgetting doesn't make something untrue. You could hear a pin drop. Hearts beating. Shallow breathing. The distant hum of the air conditioning that had just kicked back on. Sister Nene's lips tightened. She didn't blink. Didn't move. Nathan's voice, though small, echoed in every soul like a bell tolling during a funeral, each word landing with the weight of inevitability. He said, "You know his name." And he said it's time to stop pretending. Nobody dared speak. Not even Pastor Daniel. His hand was still extended toward Mama Folake's shoulder, but it had grown cold. Not from fear, but something worse. Something older than fear. Something that remembered when the world was darker and the things that lived in shadows had more power than they do now. Finally, Nene inhaled deeply, like someone about to dive into deep water. "That name is not to be said in a holy place," she muttered, her voice shaking for the first time since this whole ordeal began. "Nene," Pastor Daniel said, his pastoral authority warring with his very human terror, "what's happening? Who is he? What did you two really do 25 years ago?" She looked up, eyes glassy with something between grief and dread, like someone forced to open a door they had spent decades keeping locked. "His name is Obilona." The moment the name left her lips, a tremor passed through the air, not physical, but spiritual. You could feel it in your bones. One of the choir members fainted, her body hitting the floor with a soft thud. A woman at the back began to cough violently, like she was trying to expel something from her lungs. "That name has not been spoken since the fire at Oke Igbale," Nene whispered, her voice barely audible. "It was buried. Sealed. We made sure of it. We thought we made sure of it." Pastor Daniel's hands dropped from Folake's shoulders. She hadn't moved during this entire exchange. She was still whispering to the air, lips dry, eyes empty, carrying on a conversation with something only she could see. "And you're saying this spirit, this entity, it's following her?" "No," Nene said, the word coming out like a sob. "He's not following her." She paused, gathering courage for what came next. "He's attached to the child. The one born after the covenant. The girl. Obilona doesn't want Folake. He never did. She was just the doorway. Onjie. Onjie is the door itself. Her name was Angela Olewa. But most people just called her Onjie. 24 years old. Beautiful in a way that made elders uncomfortable, not because there was anything wrong with her beauty, but because it seemed too perfect, too knowing. Like she had been carved by hands that understood exactly what would make mortals stop and stare. She walked with grace, but it was the kind of grace that made you think she didn't belong to the earth entirely. Like if the wind blew too hard, she'd float away with it, leaving only the memory of her laughter. Onjie worked at a small fashion shop by the roadside, where her designs had gained sudden popularity over the past year. Clients said she could look at your body once and know exactly what would suit it, not just your size, but your spirit. She'd sketch something in minutes that would look like it had been made specifically for you before you were born. Her needle moved like it was guided by invisible hands, and her patterns seemed to know secrets about the women who wore them. But there was something else. Something she had never told anyone, not even her mother. Every night since her 24th birthday, she dreamed of fire. Walls of flame that didn't burn. Faces melting into smoke that reformed into faces she recognized but couldn't name. A voice calling her from the center of the blaze, always the same words, "Come home, daughter. Come home." She never told anyone because the dreams didn't frighten her. They felt like memories. Until that night, after the church incident, when she returned home and found her mother, Mama Folake, sitting in the dark, eyes wide and unblinking, muttering a name she'd never heard before. "Obilona. Obilona, the door is opening, the door is opening." "Mommy," she asked, voice trembling as she set down her purse and turned on the light. Mama Folake looked at her daughter as if seeing her for the first time, really seeing her. Not the girl she had raised, but the thing she had birthed. The price she had paid. The door she had opened. Onjie, she whispered, reaching out with a shaking hand. What have you been dreaming? That was when Onjie finally spoke the truth she had been carrying like a stone in her chest. Mommy, in my dreams, I burn. And it doesn't hurt. In my dreams, I'm standing in fire, and it feels like coming home. Oke Igbale was a hill known by few, feared by many. Even the goats refused to graze near it. They would approach the base of the slope and then turn away, bleating nervously like they could smell something rotten in the air. They said nothing grew there, not even weeds. The soil looked red from a distance, but up close, you could see it wasn't the red of clay. It was the red of old blood mixed with earth. And if you threw a stone up the slope, it never came back down. Not because it rolled away, but because the hill seemed to swallow it, like a mouth closing around food. 26 years ago, something happened there. Something Nene and Folake never wanted to speak of. Something they had tried to forget by never speaking its name, never acknowledging its anniversary, never returning even in their dreams. Until now. Pastor Daniel called them both to the church office the next day. Mama Folake still looked like her spirit was floating just behind her body, tethered by the thinnest thread. Nene, however, had come prepared. She carried a folder, thick, old, papers yellow with age. And tucked inside was a photograph burned at the corners, the edges black and brittle. This was us, Nene said, tossing the photo on the wooden desk between them. It showed them younger, 25 years younger, standing in front of a fire that blazed higher than their heads. 7 women in white wrappers, smiling awkwardly at the camera like participants in a ritual they didn't fully understand. But between them, barely visible in the dancing shadows cast by the flames, was something else. A shadow. Tall. Impossibly tall. Horned. Watching. That night, we followed the herbalist to the top of Oke Igbale. We went alone. 4 other women came with us. Each desperate for a different reason. Mama Busy wanted a husband, any husband, she said, as long as he had money. Sister Kemi wanted wealth that would make her neighbors weep with envy. Mama Tola wanted protection from her husband's fist. And I? You wanted healing, Folake whispered, her voice hollow. I wanted my womb to stop bleeding. I had been bleeding for 3 years. Every day. The doctors said there was nothing they could do. I was dying slowly, drop by drop. And Folake. I wanted to be a mother, she said, the words barely audible. Pastor Daniel leaned forward. What did you give him? What was the price? Folake looked away, but Nene answered. We each gave something different. Something precious. Something we couldn't get back once it was given. Mama Busy gave her laugh. Have you ever heard her laugh? It sounds like crying. Sister Kemi gave her peace of mind. She hasn't slept without nightmares since. Mama Tole gave her capacity to trust. She lives alone now, afraid of everyone. I gave my womb's pain, but I also gave my ability to bear children. I would live, but I would never be a mother. And Folake? Daniel asked. Folake finally looked up, tears streaming down her face. I gave my voice, she said. For one night. He said if I gave it willingly, I'd receive what I asked for. You didn't speak for a week after, Nene remembered. But when you did, you started to change. Your voice was different. Deeper. Like someone else was speaking through you sometimes. I didn't just give him my voice, Folake muttered, her words stumbling over each other like water breaking through a dam. I gave him access. To my bloodline. To any child I might have. He said the price for a child was a child. I thought he meant I would die in childbirth. I didn't understand that he meant the child would belong to him. Belong to him how? Daniel pressed. As a door, she whispered. A door between his world and ours. And when she reaches her 25th birthday, the door opens. Pastor Daniel felt his blood turn cold. When is Onje's 25th birthday? Next month, Folake said. October 31st. That night, Onje felt her skin heating up in her sleep. Not fever heat, something else. Something that started in her bones and worked its way out. She sat up, drenched in sweat that felt like oil against her skin. The fan was off, but that wasn't why she was burning. The air in her room was thick like something was breathing inside the walls. Her room flickered. Once. Twice. Then completely dark. She reached for her phone, but the screen wouldn't turn on. Dead battery, though she had charged it before sleep. Then she heard it humming. Low. Ancient. Like someone singing a lullaby from a village long buried under sand and time. She stepped out of bed slowly, her bare feet touching the cold concrete floor. At her window stood a figure. A man, but not quite. Tall, impossibly tall, his head nearly touching the ceiling though he stood on the floor. Eyes empty, not closed, not blind, but simply absent, like someone had scooped them out and left dark hollows behind. He was dressed in a black wrapper that seemed to move independently of any wind, and his feet didn't quite touch the ground. He didn't speak. He just raised one long finger and pointed, behind her. She turned. On her wall, etched in fire that burned without consuming, were 3 symbols. Glowing. Alive. Pulsing like heartbeats. Ancient Yoruba symbols that she somehow understood despite never learning to read them. The first meant covenant. The second meant blood. The third meant door. She screamed. Down the hall, Mama Folake rushed in and stopped cold when she saw the burning symbols. No, she whispered, backing against the doorframe. Not yet. She's not ready. It's too soon. Onje was shaking, tears streaming down her face. What is this? What's happening to me? But Folake didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked to the symbols and raised her left palm, revealing a burn mark Onje had never seen before. A scar in the shape of an eye, old and raised against her dark skin. When she held her palm near the burning symbols, they pulsed brighter, like recognizing like. I gave him access, Folake said, her voice empty of hope. And now, he's marking what is his. The symbols burned brighter, and then, as suddenly as they had appeared, they vanished. But the smell remained, sulfur and burning flesh and something else. Something that smelled like home. The next Sunday, the church was half empty. Fear had started to spread through the community like smoke from a brush fire. Rumors flew faster than sermons. People said the girl was cursed. That the mother was a witch who had been hiding in plain sight for decades. That Nene used to practice juju before she found God, and maybe she had never really stopped. Pastor Daniel tried to calm them during the service, but even his own dreams had started turning black. He would wake up with the taste of ash in his mouth and the sound of someone calling his name from a place he couldn't see. Church family, he preached, his voice carrying less conviction than usual, we must not let fear divide us. We must stand together in faith and. That's when the whispers started. Not from the congregation. From the walls. Quiet at first, like wind through cracks. Then louder. Voices speaking in old Yoruba, the dialect of the hills that only the elders' grandmothers still remembered. The voices were calling names, the names of everyone in the congregation, but wrong somehow. Twisted. Like someone was reading them from a list written in blood. People began to leave. Not all at once, but in ones and twos, gathering their purses and Bibles and walking quickly toward the exit without looking back. By the end of the service, only 23 people remained. That night, Sister Nene was lying awake at midnight when she heard it, 3 knocks. Not on her door. On her mirror. She walked into her bedroom and stared at the glass, her heart beating so loud she was sure the neighbors could hear it. Nothing at first. Just her own reflection, tired and scared and older than she remembered. Until her reflection stepped forward, without her moving. "Nene," it said, smiling with her own mouth, "long time no see." She backed away, reaching for the cross on her nightstand, whispering prayers under her breath in 3 languages. "Don't act surprised," the reflection said, its voice identical to hers but wrong, like an echo that came before the sound. "You buried me at Oke Igbale. But you can't bury what was never dead." "What do you want?" she asked, though her voice cracked on each word. "I want what I'm owed. I want what was promised. I want the door to open so I can finally come home." Then the mirror cracked. Once. Twice. Shattered completely. And on the wall behind it, written in what looked like blood but smelled like burning flowers. "I never left. I've been waiting inside." The following Sunday, the pew where Mama Folake usually sat was empty, but it wasn't unoccupied. Elder Toba, who didn't believe in spiritual hysteria and had been vocally criticizing what he called superstitious nonsense, had insisted the church must go on. "We cannot allow fear to paralyze the body of Christ," he'd said, waving his Bible like a weapon against doubt. He sat in Folake's usual seat during the opening prayers, his considerable bulk filling the space where her smaller frame usually perched. That was his first mistake. The second was dozing off during Pastor Daniel's sermon on breaking invisible chains. While the rest of the congregation rose for worship, Elder Toba's head dropped slightly. Just for a few seconds. But in that time, something changed. The air around him grew cold, and his breath became visible in small puffs despite the heat of the day. His mouth began to move, silently at first, lips forming words in a language that predated the church, predated Christianity, predated most of what they called civilization. "I never left." The usher beside him leaned in, thinking he was praying. Until Elder Toba turned to her, eyes rolled halfway into his head so only the whites showed, and hissed in a voice not his own, "She's still lying." There were 7 women that night, but only 6 confessed. The 7th is still hiding among you. The usher screamed, her voice cutting through the hymn like a knife through fabric. People turned, the singing died away, and Pastor Daniel rushed down from the pulpit, anointing oil in one hand, disbelief warring with terror in his eyes. Elder Toba snapped awake and looked around, confused and slightly offended by the stares. "Why are you all looking at me like I sprouted horns?" "You were speaking," Pastor Daniel said quietly, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "I was sleeping," Elder Toba said, insulted. "A man can't even rest his eyes during a sermon without being accused of." "Yes," Daniel replied, his pastoral training warring with his very human fear. "But your voice was not your own. And you spoke of things you couldn't know." That pew remained empty for the rest of the service. Nobody touched it. Not even to clean the dust that seemed to gather there despite the morning sunlight streaming through the windows. That same evening, Pastor Daniel received a visitor. She arrived as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the church compound. She wore black from head to toe, not mourning clothes, but the kind of black that seemed to absorb light rather than merely reflecting it. Her lips were dry and cracked, marked by strange scars that formed patterns around her mouth. Her feet were dusty, as if she had walked a great distance on roads that existed only in memory. She introduced herself as Madam Ajak, and she spoke with a lisp caused by a peculiar scar that ran across her tongue, a straight line, like someone had cut it with a razor and let it heal crooked. "I was there," she said simply, settling into the chair across from Pastor Daniel's desk without being invited to sit. "Where?" he asked, though something in his spirit already knew. "Oke Igbale. I was the 7th woman." The one nobody mentions. The one they pretend never existed. He offered her water. She declined with a shake of her head that made her wrapper rustle like dry leaves. You need to hear the rest, she said, her scarred tongue making certain sounds difficult. Because what you think you're fighting, it's not just a spirit seeking revenge. What is it then? She smiled, and the expression was painful to look at, like watching someone try to be happy with a mouth full of broken glass. It's a contract. With terms and conditions written in blood. And the contract is almost complete. Madame Ajak explained, her voice growing stronger as she spoke, as if telling the truth after 25 years of silence was healing something inside her. 7 women, 7 different desires, 7 different prices. We thought we were clever, going together. We thought there was safety in numbers. We were wrong. She pulled out a small notebook, pages yellowed and brittle, and read from it. Mama Busy wanted a husband, she gave her natural laugh and received a man who beats her when she shows joy. Sister Kemi wanted wealth, she gave her peace of mind and now owns 3 houses but hasn't slept through a single night. Mama Tola wanted protection, she gave her ability to trust and lives alone, afraid of every shadow. Nene wanted healing, she gave her womb's pain but also her fertility. Folake wanted a child, she gave her voice and received a daughter who was never fully hers. And you? Pastor Daniel asked. I wanted the truth. I wanted to know who had been stealing from my store, who had been spreading lies about my family, who had caused my business to fail. She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. I gave my ability to lie. For 25 years, I have not been able to tell a single falsehood without bleeding from my mouth. Every word I speak is truth, whether I want it to be or not. She paused, touching her scarred lips. But I had a dream 3 nights ago, she added, her voice cracking with something between hope and terror. In the dream, a fire was coming for the church. And in the fire stood a girl, burning, but not screaming. Laughing. And the laughter was setting everything free. Pastor Daniel felt his mouth go dry. Onjie. She nodded slowly. She is not cursed, Madame Ajak said, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more weight than shouting. She never was. She is the key.